So welcome to the webinar. My name's Rolfe and thank you for joining us. In this webinar we're going to be welcome to the webinar on running your in-house mentoring program. In this about an hour we'll spend together, we'll talk about how you can run an in-house mentoring program. In particular, we'll look at the resources that are required to run an effective in-house mentoring program. We'll talk about what must be done in-house and what you might choose to outsource, and we'll also spend some time looking at realistic costing for your mentoring program. You know, while priorities often shift in this climate, one thing never changes. For organisations, people really are their greatest asset. And while most just say that, if you offer mentoring, you show you really mean it. That's why I love partnering with organisations that genuinely value their people and demonstrate it through mentoring. Strategically, mentoring is a cost-effective method for attracting, retaining and developing people if you do it right. Just to tell you a little bit about Mentoring Works, we're all about mentoring for better outcomes. My consultancy has been operating for 23 years. Mentoring Works has been instrumental in the success of hundreds of mentoring programs, and our products and services support people and programs throughout the world. So we know what can go wrong and how to avoid costly mistakes that are all too easy to make. Also, we know how to save you time and effort in creating mentoring conversations, relationships and programs that work. I guarantee you'll leave this webinar with practical information that you can use, and I have a special offer at the end that will add even more value. So let's make sure that you make the most of our time together. I know that maybe some of you have participated in webinars before, but some certainly may have not. So just to make sure, we're going to, I'd like you to have a look at the control panel that should be on your screen at the moment. And what I suggest you do is you'll see the little hand up button there, and if you want to ask a question or make a comment at any time, you can click on that hand and I'll see it here on my control panel, and at an appropriate time I'll invite you to either speak if you have a microphone and I'll turn your microphone on, or you can actually type in your question and I'll read it out and respond to it online. I suggest that you take plenty of notes. This is a big topic, as you can imagine. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I'm going to give you some other references as well, but I suggest that you jot down notes and questions. I will be stopping several times during the webinar and inviting you to ask a question or make a comment. So jot your questions down and be ready for that. As I said, you can type in a question at any time and I'll pause at various places during the webinar to answer those. If you have a headset and particularly a microphone, you'll actually be able to participate even more actively. And what you'll be able to do, I've got everybody's microphone is muted at the moment, but what I'll do is if you have your hand up and I know that you've got a microphone, I will actually unmute your mic so that you can speak and everyone will hear you. At the moment I've got all the microphones muted so we don't get too much background noise. We've had a little bit of background noise here in our office, but I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to be a problem for us. But if it is, I apologise in advance. Also, just relax. I won't be calling on you unless you've got your hand up to actually speak online, so you can just relax. And but it is good to be active in your participation. Make your notes, type in questions, and respond when I give you a questionnaire to do in a minute. So we have a number of people, both from Australia and from overseas, and be interesting to know a little bit more about who's online. And I'm going to ask you a question or two right now. In fact, I'm going to put a poll up on the screen, and what I'm most interested to know is where you're at in terms of your mentoring programs. So coming up on your screen now, you see there are 3 responses. You can click on any one of those. I'm interested to know Are you currently running a mentoring program? Are you planning one, perhaps for next year or sometime soon? Or are you here just simply exploring a general interest in mentoring? So take a second now. Seeing many of you are responding. Most of you have actually responded. Excellent. Everyone has responded. So let's have a look at what you actually said. So what I'm seeing here is that we've got almost a pretty even split, with many of you actually already running a mentoring program. So what I'll be inviting you to do, if you're currently running a mentoring program, I'm going to invite you to make some comments and share some information with other people. Now, you can, as I said, speak if you've got a microphone. What you might prefer to do is type in responses to questions I ask you, and if you would prefer to remain anonymous, just simply type at the beginning of your message, type in anon, and I won't mention your name, so that we can share a lot of information without necessarily disclosing what's going on in a particular organisation. If you're happy that it's public information, I'll probably acknowledge you by name as you send us in information, and thank you for sharing that. So we've got quite a large proportion of the people online currently are actually planning a mentoring program, so that's good. It's good to have a little bit of lead time to do your planning, and I think you'll find you'll get a lot of food for thought from this webinar. And we've got a group who are exploring a general interest in mentoring. So I have to tell you that I'm talking about running mentoring programs rather than specifically how to mentor and those sorts of things. So if that's what you need to know, then I can talk to you offline, and that applies to anyone on the line at the moment, or you can go to the website where I've got lots more information that you're welcome to access there. So thank you for responding to that poll. What I'd like to ask you to do, for those of you who have or are planning your mentoring program, I'd like you to type in, if you would, who is your target group? So in other words, who are going to be mentored in your program? Who is it you want to provide assistance to? So if you could type that in, and I'm going to read out what you type in. Okay, so for Rachel, it's graduates. Okay, okay, we've also got graduates coming in. Thanks, Vanessa. A lot of graduates. Catherine also says graduates. Okay, anyone got anyone other than? Yep, looks like graduates are the number one. Okay, we've got someone saying, okay, longer term staff members. Okay, thank you. Okay, so looks like the vast majority of you are, okay, most people looking at graduates, but we also have some people looking at frontline managers and longer term staff. So my next question to you actually then, if this is your target group, why are you targeting them? So perhaps you'd like to share. If you're willing to speak and you've got a microphone, I'd love you to raise your hand and I'll open your microphone and you can tell us a little bit about why you've chosen this group. If you don't have a microphone, could you type in again, please? Okay, so Karen, I see that you have your hand up. So we're going to open your microphone, Karen, and tell us a little bit about your target group. Karen, are you there? Not hearing you, Karen. Okay, so Karen's typed into me. Okay. Okay, so we currently do not have a mentoring or even buddy system, so there is a need for support. Okay, looking at increasing retention and succession planning. That's okay. So we've got, Vernell, you're saying your target group is actually longer term staff, and what you want to do is increase retention of longer term staff and succession planning. Okay, so we've got improved graduate program and use this group as a pilot for the rest of the organisation. Okay, Rachel's saying mentoring is new to our company and the graduates seem to like a good pilot group. Oh, I see. So the graduates are a good pilot group. Yes, they are. And also it seems to be fundamental of successful graduate programs. Yeah, I just came back and I met many of you at the Australian Association of Graduate Employers, and it seems that mentoring is a part or planned to be a part of many graduate programs. Okay, hello Leanne. You're saying my target group is our senior management team as mentors for the next level of managers. And we certainly need to be thinking about developing leadership in our organisations. You know, next year will be the first year that we have more people leaving the workforce than joining it, and we are very much on our way to a skills shortage, and so we certainly need to be looking at this. Okay, so this is an organisation doesn't have a mentoring program established but would also like to target graduates. Okay. So Aaron's saying a lot have come from technical roles and need exposure to experienced managers. Carmen's saying it assists in conveying culture and increase retention rates. Okay, ensuring that we are following best practice. So thanks for all of your responses there. And in fact, the useful part about this too is that I believe there are at least 15 questions you need to answer to ensure that mentoring works. Knowing who you're targeting and why and what strategic outcomes you're aiming for is the critical first step if you're really going to have an effective mentoring program. And if you've got good answers to those questions, you've got 3 of the 15 you need to ensure your mentoring program works. I'm going to run through all 15 questions real fast to give you an overview and just get you thinking. I've actually put them together in a movie on my website, and I'll send you the link after the webinar so that you can refer back to it when you need to. So let's have a quick look at these 15 questions. First of all, what is mentoring? And it might seem like a very obvious question, but I can tell you the number of times I've walked into a room and people have very different ideas about what mentoring is, what it could be, or what it should be. So what I recommend to you is that you define mentoring in your organisation for your program and make that very clear. In fact, document that. What is your mentoring aiming for? So what's the strategic outcome that you're really looking for? What is the return on investment that you're expecting? Who will mentor and be mentored? I've asked you who your target group is, and you also need to think about who is going to actually be the mentors for your group, who's appropriate to take on that role. What are their roles and their responsibilities? How will you recruit participants? So are you going to call for volunteers? Are you going to compel your graduates to be involved? Just how are you going to do that? How will you match the pairs? What are you going to do to actually put them together? How often will they meet? So some of the logistics and guidelines to your mentoring program. What do you expect of people? Most importantly, how will you develop their mentoring skills? Lots of people think they know about mentoring, and certainly they may do, but the skills of mentoring are quite different from the skills of management or supervision. What activities will you have in your program? You can't simply put people together and leave them to it. There need to be a range of activities, which I'm going to talk about in this webinar. How will you support and sustain mentoring? It's not good enough just to kick it off and leave people to it. You'll find that that's a recipe where mentoring relationships are likely to actually fizzle out. Who will manage the program? Who's going to make sure that things happen? How will you actually get the mentoring message across? You need a communication strategy that reaches the people you want to be involved as well as other people who are not directly involved in your mentoring program. How are you going to measure the results? What sort of evaluation are you going to do of the program? How long will it take to prepare and implement your mentoring program? If you are planning a mentoring program for next year, it's just as well you are here and now, because I think you're going to see that you will need plenty of time to actually think through, make a plan, get things ready for your mentoring program to launch within first quarter next year. So I sped through all of those points. I'm going to go through some of them in a bit more detail in this webinar, but I'm guessing that it's got you thinking about what sort of resources are needed to run an effective mentoring program. And I'd like you to actually type in as broad and general a way as you wish. Just start to type in now. What sort of resources? What are some of the things that you think are going to be required? I will read out what people type in, and then you can add to your own list if you're taking some notes or get some input from your colleagues. Please type in what resources do you think. I'm going to share my ideas with you, but let's get some of yours coming in. Okay, so Vanessa is saying resources needed, a training package for mentors. Thanks, Vanessa. Some thoughts from other people. Okay. Just type in anything you can think of. Okay, Catherine's saying senior leadership buy-in. Absolutely. You do need your senior leaders to be on board, and that's part of the reason you need to pay attention to your communication strategy. There you go, the communication strategy. And by the way, I'm not going to talk about that much today. I'm going to cover a lot of ground in a short time, but I do have a recorded webinar on the website that looks at your communication strategy. So give yourself a little note to check that out after the webinar. Okay, Carmen is saying a training package and support materials for mentors, corporate sponsorship. Okay, cool. Communication methods, says Vernell. Enthusiastic participants, yes, Karen. Enthusiastic participants and mentors, written supporting documentation, executive support and a plan. Okay, that's fantastic. Let's move on now, and I find it's easier to get our heads around the resources we need if we start to look at our mentoring strategy in a bit more detail. And there's kind of 3 stages, very broadly speaking: preparing, facilitating, and supporting. And just looking at these words, you start to realise that implementing a mentoring program is a very active process. You can't just put people together and leave them to it. Well, you can actually, and some of them will make it work, but there's a very good chance most will fizzle out, and you certainly won't achieve anything like the results that are possible. In fact, sometimes a poor mentoring program is worse than no mentoring program at all. So in terms of planning, the first thing you need to do is specify your outcomes and your success indicators. And again, not going to talk about that a lot today. There is another recorded webinar on the website that specifically looks at stating your aims. You want to then, once you've got your outcomes and success indicators figured out, you can then start to work on, okay, well, what activities will we need to do to ensure we nail those outcomes? And from that, you can start to look at the logistics and scheduling. Then you've got to work on your communication strategy. So looking at ways that you'll actually promote the program, you'll be able to explain the strategic value and the personal benefits. Now, this goes back to stage 1 where you're defining those outcomes for yourself. If you're not clear on those, you don't have much chance of actually communicating the value to other people. So you will need to invest some time in doing that. And of course then you need to actually invite participation and have a strategy for getting people to get involved in the program. That then leads to selecting and matching participants. You want to then look at how you're going to develop their skills. It might be live workshops and or online learning, and you're going to need to provide some sort of information kit or participant materials that actually guide people through the mentoring process. And finally, there we go, we get to facilitate those one-to-one meetings. So actually you can see that we're kind of halfway through our timeline before people have actually got together. And I think there's a bit of a clue there for you in terms of how much time you need to do your preparation. You do need a mentoring support program. I've seen far too many pilot programs set up, a lot of enthusiasm, kicked off with a great big launch, and then people are just left and there's no follow-up. So you need some plan for your follow-up, and there needs to be both individual, in my opinion, as well as group follow-up, and I think you really need to be doing evaluation all the way through, not just at the end. So having looked at this, you can see the need for the resources that you listed before. Basically, we're talking about you need time, you need money, you need physical resources, people, information, participant materials, etc. So I'm going to pause now for questions. And again, if you put your hand up, I'll try your microphone. Otherwise, you can start to type in questions right now. I'm just going to pause for a few seconds so that you can type in any questions that you have right now. I'm just checking to see if I've got any hands up. Not seeing any hands up at the moment, and I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So what I'm going to do is move on. You can at any time type in, okay, so someone's saying, will you cover this in this session, ideas on how best to match participants? Vanessa, no, I'm not going to cover that in this session. This is more about getting your planning and getting your mentoring program up and running rather than the detail. I can have a conversation with you offline if you wish. I will also check which one of the recorded webinars I've actually talked about matching in, and let you know about that after the webinar. So thanks for that question, Vanessa. Okay, you're welcome, Vanessa. Okay, so let's keep moving. Short time, lot to cover. Okay, so you're thinking about your resources, you're thinking about what must be done in-house and what you need to get help with. And let's talk about that some more. There aren't any hard and fast rules, except maybe, in my opinion, this one. I believe, regardless of how much you do outsource, you're going to need a person in-house to actually manage the program, or at least coordinate the program. So you need an in-house person who keeps an eye on things and who is the go-to person for your participants, first port of call for all information. And in fact, I'm going to send you a coordinator's checklist. We'll email this to you. These points that are coming up now, you're probably too small and too many of them for you to actually read, but very quickly, some of the things that a mentoring coordinator probably needs to manage, if not do themselves. Prepare an information package, including mentoring guidelines, publicise the program, distribute information, schedule the training and functions, book and prepare venues. So you can see there's a lot of admin there, but there's also the higher level management issues, such as communicating with managers and people not involved in the program. So there's almost two roles within the one heading there. Some people, the label is program director, or it might be coordinator or manager, whatever works for you, but there's quite a lot to actually be done in-house to some degree or other. So I'm just going to pause again for questions. I see Rachel's asked me a question, and she's saying, do you find with successful programs that it's a mixture of people who drive the mentoring process, or is there one key person that manages the whole process. Rachel, I think there needs, look, in some organisations there will be a team. It might be a steering committee, or it might be a task force, or it might be a small group of people. It depends on the size of your program. Inevitably, there needs to be one, even if it's a committee, you need a chairperson who keeps driving it, because what typically happens is people have a lot of other responsibilities apart from mentoring, and everyone is so busy, and in fact, I think it will be fair to say that many people are actually overloaded in their roles today. And so bottom line is one person needs to be the chair, the driver, whatever you want to call it, and if you can surround yourself with a group of people who will help, that's great. I also believe in champions, so people who might have nothing to do with the administration or actual management of your mentoring program, but will go out and what do you call it, evangelize, if you like. They are program champions, mentoring champions, and they will talk up and keep the topic alive, maybe in the senior management with the executive, maybe even the boardroom. These are champions that are on side and will really help you out in terms of promoting the program. Yes, I think there is a mixture of people who drive the mentoring process, Rachel, but I think one person needs to take bottom line responsibility. After all, you're going to have a budget for this, so who's going to manage the budget? Okay, you're welcome there, Rachel. Any other questions? Now's the time. Okay, I'll keep an eye out for questions coming in. Okay, Catherine, what are you saying to me? Interested in the types of activity that can be undertaken in a mentoring program. All right, let's get on to that in just a moment, Catherine. I'll keep that question there, make sure I cover it. Okay, so kind of coming up to that now. We've got some comments and questions. So I think this is part of your question, Catherine, and I'm going to go in a bit more detail as we go through as well. So in terms of the education, training and support for mentoring, I've called it education, but in the beginning, and you'll see I've got the heading there, promotion. If you have a marketing background or any knowledge of marketing, you could label it that, because that's what it is. Marketing is about finding out what the market needs and then designing something that caters, that actually answers those needs, and then getting the message across. So whatever you want to call that, I've labelled it promotion in this model. And the number of ways that you can do that include personal communication, so actually getting up in front of a meeting and talking to people, or buttonholing them in the corridors, or setting up meetings where you talk to people one-on-one. You can do management briefings, staff information sessions. You'll also need some print, maybe some audio-visual or web-based resources there. I'm suggesting also, so what you're doing there is educating the whole organisation about what mentoring is, why it's important, the strategic value it adds in the organisation. Then we're getting more closely to our actual participants, and you're going to have some sort of, if not pre-work, some sort of information kit that goes out to potential and then your actual participants. And again, you can do this, as you can see, in print, audio, visual, on the web, or you can do it individual. You want workshops. I believe that mentors and mentorees need to be trained. Lots of organisations do this separately before they bring the pairs together, and that's a useful model. Then you've got your individual follow-up, and you might want to do some of this face-to-face, web, email, again, your audio-visual or printed stuff. And I'm also recommending, if you have the budget for it, do some mentoring for your mentors. Question I often get asked by mentors is, well, who mentors me? And then you've got your group follow-up sessions. Mentoring programs are more than just one-on-one mentoring. What you actually do is set up a network, and people can get fantastic value out of extending their network through your mentoring program. I also recommend that you do a midpoint review. If you can at all, if it's at all possible, bring the group together. You might do a webinar like this if you can't get them together face-to-face, and some sort of final event. So just wondering if you've got any questions about that. Okay. I'm going to give you some specific examples of programs also a little bit in a little while. So I'll give you some specific activities, Catherine, in just a moment. Okay, not seeing any more questions at the moment, not seeing any hands up right now. So I'm going to talk then about evaluation of your mentoring program. And I'm talking about it now because you need to set up and think about your evaluation right from the very beginning of planning your mentoring. That's why I talked about talking about your outcomes right at the beginning. When you're going to evaluate, you're going to look at, did the relationships work? Did mentoring make a difference to the individuals? And were there worthwhile organisational outcomes? So plan this from the beginning. You need to know what outcomes you're trying to create. And some of you do know those really well because you talked about retention. And okay. Leanne saying, is this where you would suggest outsourcing rather than in-house? Actually, Leanne, I guess you're talking about the evaluation. Should the evaluation be in-house or outsourced? I would say that if you run your program more in-house, so it's a totally in-house program, I would suggest you outsource the evaluation and the other way round. Not evaluation, okay, I'm answering the wrong question. Thanks, Leanne. Oh, okay. So my slides are coming up more slowly at your end than they're coming up here. I apologise for that. The bandwidth, I'm checking out on another computer and seeing what's coming up there, thinking that that's what you're seeing. So workshops, yeah. I reckon that that it's a good idea to outsource your workshops. Please understand I have a vested interest because this is what I do. However, can I suggest to you that when you outsource a workshop on any topic at all, so forget mentoring, when you bring a specialist from outside of your organisation, someone who focuses on that particular topic all the time, not only are you going to get more information, you get, it's like a profit in your own land, you know. You know, like I was talking to a guy on the weekend and he is a fitness expert, okay. He's a personal trainer. His brother was going on a diet and the guy's going like, dude, why are you going on a diet? Diets don't work. Talk to me. I understand about this stuff. But would the brother talk to him? No, he wouldn't because he's too close. And it's similar in an organisation. If you're going to stand up in front of your peers or even people who are more senior to you and talk about mentoring, you're giving yourself a bit more of a tough job than if you bring in someone who's a specialist in that field. You'll just get a bit more credibility with the audience, and that's really important. So that said, please understand I do have a vested interest, so you always need to check out other people's opinions when you're getting advice from someone who might be a bit biased, so take that as you will. Okay, so we're on to evaluation, talking about you need to make sure that your mentoring does produce worthwhile organisational outcomes. Again, I've got a whole webinar on evaluation and how to do this, so I'm going to run through just a couple of ideas here in terms of what you'll need to actually evaluate. So in your evaluation, you want to look at the processes that you used. And if you're currently running an in-house program, I'd be very interested if you're doing this kind of evaluation, if you're looking at the processes, so how you actually recruit and select people, how you match them, your communication strategy, and how effective was that. So gathering some information about that. Of course, you want to look at the mentoring relationships, how many of those relationships were maintained over the period of time, and what was the quality of those relationships. So actually asking people how the mentoring was for them. You also want to look at the support that you gave to people in your mentoring program. the training, the materials, the resources that you provided, and those support activity. What did people think of those? What did they value most? What did they value least? What did they actually use? And finally, those outcomes. And you want to look at outcomes for the mentorees. So many of you are mentoring graduates. So what outcomes did they achieve as a result of mentoring? But also ask the mentors themselves. My experience is that that most mentors will tell you that they feel they get a lot out of mentoring. In fact, I've had a number of mentors say they feel they get more out of it than the mentorees. So ask them. That's useful information, not only for you to know, but for you to use in recruiting mentors, and also from giving feedback to the organisation about the strategic value of your mentoring program to the organisation. So, and of course, organisational outcomes as well. Please understand that if you do this kind of evaluation, you can't necessarily get organisational results at the end of 12 months. You probably will have to look at a longer term view. So I'm suggesting, I'm spending more time on this evaluation because I believe you need to make a plan for this right from the outset. You need to sit down and work out attributes of success. So in other words, if you were starting a program in February next year, say February or March next year, and you were evaluating that program 12 months later, what would you look at to say, or what would you see or hear or be able to know that program had actually been successful? That then allows you to identify what sort of information you need for your evaluation. Where are you going to get that? What are the data sources? What strategies will you use? So in other words, can you go and ask people? Will you send out a survey? Do you have like before and after measures? So some of you are talking about retention. So you measure retention in the 12 months previous and then look at it for the 12 months, 2 years or so forth afterwards. Be aware that there are other extraneous factors that may occur that can impact on the results, and you also need to think about how are you actually going to report this information, who needs to know it, and how will you actually present it to them. So the sorts of measures, and I've mentioned a couple of these, I love it if you can get hold of before and after measures. Something concrete, data that's already in your organisation that you can say, okay, X% of graduates were here 12 months after we hired them, 2 years after we hired them, 3 years after we hired them, so forth. Before we ran a mentoring program, this was our retention rate. After we started running mentoring, this was the retention rate. Obviously, reaction surveys, something a bit more effective than just a smiley sheet. It's not that hard to come up with. Some organisations, some people keep a learning journal. I do recommend this. It's kind of hard to get people to do it. Some people love them, some people hate them, but not to be handed in, but get people to go back to their own learning journal and let you know some of the things they actually learned. You can do a monthly informal review, so pick up the phone or go and see people and have a quick chat to them, find out what's working and what needs maybe to be done differently. You can do individual structured interviews, you can do focus groups or workshops, and of course you can do survey questionnaires. So basically, in a nutshell, I recommend before you start, you make sure you've got your success indicators documented. I recommend that you do early follow-up. In fact, what I suggest you do once you've paired people and got them started, follow them up no more than about a month later. Make sure they've met, that they've got some goals mapped out, that they've got a schedule worked out for their mentoring program. And then monitor. Don't check up on them, but check in with them to make sure things are going okay. Do a midpoint review. A bit more formally if you can get the group together either online or face-to-face, because if you've got a 12-month program and you review at the 6-month point, if things aren't working so well, it's not too late to save it. And if they are working well, and this is where the group review is really helpful. Some people typically are going gangbusters, having a great time. If you get them to tell other people how well they're going, it gives the ones who maybe aren't going so well some inspiration to get going. It gives them some tips on what they need to do, and you can renew their commitment and their enthusiasm. I do recommend a final event. It's useful if you've got a finite period of your mentoring. It might be 12 months. With graduates it could be longer, but it is good to have an end point for your program where you give people the opportunity to say thank you very much, that was great, and actually release those mentors to go on and mentor someone else, or perhaps groom the people who are mentored to mentor others in turn. And many of your measures you'll need to continue post-program, so you won't necessarily get an accurate measure of outcomes immediately at the conclusion of the program. Obviously you can find out things about the quality of the relationships and those sorts of things, but the more strategic outcomes you're going to have to measure a bit later on. So I'm going to pause for breath here. I want to talk about what it will cost, because I know from the questions that came in beforehand that many of you are concerned about budget and so forth. So what I'd suggest to you that a realistic costing of your mentoring program includes a number of factors, not just the dollars that you're going to spend. And however, I'd suggest to you that what you need to be looking at is your in-house resources, and the greater your in-house capability and competence, the less money you may need to spend on bringing in external resources. And it's not necessarily an either-or situation. It's much more likely, in fact, in most mentoring programs, there's a collaboration, a blend of in-house and external resources. So when you're doing your budget, be sure you factor in the time of your internal people in preparing, facilitating and supporting the mentoring strategy. I see far too many programs where the internal people responsible have this dumped on them on top of their full-time committed role, and it's a no-brainer that an approach, that sort of approach isn't going to deliver without great cost to either the people, the program, or their other responsibilities. This is a big project. Whether you've got 10 people or 100 people, you need to bear in mind that that it will take time. So capability, what I mean by capability as opposed to competence is internal people need to be allocated time to do the activities that are required to make the program work. Otherwise, and as I said to you before, sometimes a poor program can be worse than no program at all. So make sure that any internal people who are responsible for mentoring, it's allocated like a project. So if you've got a full-time job now, the question needs to be, okay, what am I going to give up, or what needs to be delegated to someone else in order that I can take this role on and do it justice. And then you've got to look at competence in terms of the knowledge and skills and experience that people have in the area of mentoring to bring to the program. So, so it's kind of a sliding scale there in terms of what you actually do in-house and what you actually outsource. Another handout that I'm going to send to you after the webinar contains 30 activities required for your mentoring program, and lets you kind of go through and decide, okay, yeah, we can do this, or maybe we need some help with that. So I'll send that to you. Now, before I give you some specific examples of costs, it would be good to hear from some of you who are actually running mentoring programs. Maybe you're willing to share, and again, if you want to be anonymous, you can, just as you're typing, type in anon, and I won't mention your name if you prefer to do it that way. So I'd like some examples for us to all hear about what you did in-house and what you actually outsourced. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, take a drink of water while maybe you type in if you've got a mentoring program now, what did you do yourself? What did you outsource? Okay, just while you're typing in, I hope, I am going to give you a couple of, I'm in fact going to give you 3 specific examples of mentoring programs and ideas of their costing in just a moment. Okay. Okay, outsource mentor and mentoring workshops. There's Rachel, good move. Anyone else? Just checking to see if anyone's got a hand up. Okay. Okay, Catherine, all in-house. Okay, cool. So you can do this all in-house if you wish. You can outsource parts of it. Okay. All right, let me move on, and I'm going to give you some examples and some costings. Okay. So 3 examples I'm going to give you. One was a quite informal program, and what I mean by informal means that, well, I'll show you the example in a moment, but an informal program costs less than $10,000 plus internal resources. A structured program I'm going to show you that costs less than $20,000 and a much bigger scale. Those first 2 were both for 12 pairs. The third one was a bigger program for 45 pairs, and the outsourcing cost of that was less than $150,000. Obviously, I can't tell you what the internal resources cost because there are just so many variables, and it depends what dollar value you put on people's time. So let's have a look at some examples, but what you need to keep in mind is to work out what it's going to cost for you, you need to be realistic about what you want to do. You also need to make informed decisions about how you'll do it. And you're going to need to do a fair bit of resource, maybe talk to some other people with in-house programs and find out what they did. And I'll give you the opportunity to do that through the Mentoring Works website next year. I'll talk more about that later. But make informed decisions about how you'll do things, do your research, do your homework, and then the other thing, and I've harped on about this, I'm going to bang on about this till the cows come home, because this is all about determine the worth of the program to the organisation. You need to understand and be able to communicate the strategic value of your mentoring program. What does it add to the bottom line? What does it save you? And for example, many of you online today were at the AAGE conference, and you probably saw the figures there where they said the mean cost of hiring a graduate is around $6,000. Now, some people spend a lot more, and some people spend less than that. That was the mean, $6,000 before they even walk in the door. The research also showed that there was very little return on investment until the 3rd year, when it dramatically went up in terms of return on investment on that graduate that you hire. And the other thing was that 1 in 10 graduates didn't stay beyond the 1st year, wasn't there at the end of their 1st year, and 50% had moved on by the 5th year. So in terms of determining the worth of a program to the organisation, imagine if you came up with some dollar figures around those kinds of statistics for your organisation. I think you'd be able to show fairly clearly that it's a worthwhile investment in mentoring, as long as you're going to do it right and actually make a difference to those figures. So you'll need to measure before and after. So let's have a look at some examples. This one that's coming up on your screen now is what I would call an informal mentoring program. All we did, and these are programs that I've worked on, all the client wanted me to do in this case was to come in and run some workshops and provide some participant materials. They made those workshops available to anyone who wanted to come along. What happened after that was they sent people away to find their own mentoring partner. Well, whether or not that happened, I don't know, and I suspect they don't know either, because they did no real follow-up. That was pretty much left to the individuals. Those that attended the workshop did receive emailed mentoring tips in terms of follow-up, and there was no other real follow-up. There was no coordinator who talked to people. There was certainly no evaluation beyond, like the typical reaction survey at the end of those workshops. So that's why I call an informal mentoring program. There was no link to strategic outcomes. There were no specific objectives set. There was no measurement of those. I question, beyond ticking the box and saying we're doing something about mentoring, I question the value of that kind of approach. But if that's what the client insists upon, that's what happens. This one I'm showing you now is a more structured mentoring program, and this had more thought going into it. There was a planning process at the front end. What we did was we designed information kits. We put lots of information out there. We promoted the program, and people were invited to put in an expression of interest. A specific group was targeted. There was a matching process that happened. We ran 3 half-day workshops, one for mentors by themselves, one for the mentees by themselves, and then we brought them together as paired mentoring pairs, and we provided participant materials. They had a structure for setting an agreement between themselves. They were asked to actually formulate goals and document those goals and put together a mentoring plan. And there was a coordinator who actually spoke to each of those people, made sure that they had agreements and goals and plans in place. We then did a midpoint review where we got the whole group back together and looked at what was working well and what maybe needed to be worked on a bit more, and we did a final event, brought the group back, gave some closure, gave an acknowledgement gift to the mentors, and we followed that up with a questionnaire, evaluation and a report on that one. So that was a program, cost less than $20,000 for the external part of that, plus the internal coordinator cost. That was for 12 pairs. There was one person managing that program. And finally, this was a much bigger program. This was 45 pairs. This was actually billed as an e-mentoring program. There was a lot of consultation at the front end to develop the communication plan. This was a program that was a women's program across the state of New South Wales, a very large area, and almost all of it happened online. So there were program materials, there was a website, a secure portal set up for the delivery, a lot of communication and program, literally marketing of that program. Quite a big process, as you can imagine, 45 pairs, so 90 people to be paired up. We ran an information session for the pairs together, just a short half-day session, and everything else happened online, including a lot of the contact between the pairs. We set up an exclusive web-based e-mentoring community, so people could actually network with the other participants. We had online forums. We did teleseminars. Now when I do this, we do webinars, much more effective. They got mentoring tips. There were a bunch of structured activities, and there was an in-house person as well as myself as an external coordinator available for any assistance by email or by phone. And then we did an evaluation that included a pre-survey, a midpoint, and a post-mentoring survey, and a full evaluation report. So that was a much bigger program. The budget for that, the total budget for that was $250,000, and probably about half of that was for the external resources, and the other half was spent, because it was a big program, in a whole bunch of things that they did themselves, including the marketing, as you can imagine. So Questions. We're coming to the last 5 minutes of our webinar, so if you have some questions, I'm going to keep talking. I'll keep an eye out for your questions if you have them coming in, and I'll pause in a moment and respond to any questions that you might have. So type in now. But basically what we've covered very quickly, and I understand I've spoken very quickly and kind of, I wanted to give you kind of the helicopter view rather than the detail. But we have talked about the resources required and made that comparison between what you can do in-house and what you might need to outsource, and hopefully given you a fair bit to think about in terms of setting your realistic costs. I'm seeing a question coming from Rachel. Okay, Rachel, given that a lot of graduates are Gen Y, would you see online mentoring as more enticing for them? How would this impact on possible older mentors from the baby boomer era? Yeah, look, as a baby boomer myself, I can tell you that you know, we're being dragged kicking and screaming sometimes into the online world where Gen Y are completely comfortable. You know, they talk about being digital natives because Gen Y grew up with, I think they were born with a mobile phone in their hand, and they certainly have manual dexterity when it comes to texting that us poor oldies can never hope to match. But when you have a compelling reason, you soon start to acquire skills. And in fact, I would suggest to you that this is one of the major benefits of mentoring between baby boomers and Gen Y. We can actually get caught up and brought up to speed when we've got a tame Gen Y. And I speak as one I'm sitting next to me who saves me every day and teaches me heaps. You know, this matching between people of different generations is so powerful and so useful. I would say to you, yes, for Gen Y it can be more enticing, but I would suggest to you it's more the networking opportunity that you'll give them online. We do something that's kind of like an exclusive Facebook for mentors and graduates to participate in. Don't underestimate the value of face-to-face, but when you've got people that are distant locations, they're going to find the online very useful. And I've just started a program where I'm simply supporting mentors online. We sent out their invitation to their website this morning about 9:30, and by 10 o'clock we had a dozen or so people who jumped onto it already. As soon as I'm off this webinar, I'm going online to start talking to those people, and they are not Gen Y. They are mentors that are considerably older. Okay, so I'll talk to you some more about that, Rachel, offline if you want to pursue the conversation. What's the best way to run a program where you have hundreds of participants? Well, you're obviously going to need a lot more resources, Karen, and I would suggest to you, you will need to do something online, even if it's only to have like a SharePoint or an intranet where people can download information. You're going to need dedicated in-house coordinator or coordinators. So quite a bit. I'll talk to you some more offline as well, Karen, as I know you're in the planning phase. Okay, I hope that you've received some food for thought from this. If you'd like to take a second, I've got one more thing I want to talk to you about, but you might start to think about what you gained and how you'll use it, and either type into to the question panel or just make a note for yourself. This webinar has been recorded, and it'll be up on our website by Wednesday, if not sooner. Might be up this afternoon, but certainly by Wednesday it'll be up there, and you'll be able to view it again. What I'd like to share with you is that there's a lot more information available, and I'm going to make you a special offer that's going to be available only until the 17th of December, because we're shutting the office on the 20th for Christmas. So the offer is basically this. we have a package of material. Some of you who've been online may have taken a look at these. Some of you have already bought these. Our whole package is called the Works Package, and what it contains is the Mentoring Conversation book, the Mentoring Guide, which is a book, the Mentoring Journal, and most importantly for those of you online today, the How to Design and Run Your Own Mentoring Program. This is a manual that accompanies a workshop, but it can stand alone, that gives you a lot more detail about all of the things that I've covered today from that helicopter view. Also a Designing Mentoring Programs audio CD, which has some case studies in it, mentoring articles, and the Take a Minute to Mentor little flip over desktop, like a little calendar, but it flips over with beautiful images and thoughts to inspire you. Now that package in hard copy normally costs you $215 plus postage. However, if you want to purchase this before the 17th of December, I'm going to throw in two ebooks. One is called Recruiting Mentors and the other one is called The Mentor's Role, and both of those contain newer material that's not covered in the hard copy stuff that's been available for a little while. But the other thing that I'm going to provide for you if you buy before the 17th of December is personal mentoring. So you can book this. So the idea is get the materials, go through them, start developing some questions you need more answers to, and then book with me sometime in 2011, as soon as you like, after about the 10th of January at least. You can book an hour with me. We can do it by phone, or indeed we might do it by GoToMeeting, so this sort of format, so I can actually show you things online. But you can have an hour personal mentoring where we look at where you are at with your mentoring program, and I will answer any questions to either get your mentoring program going, or maybe refine it or evaluate it, whatever you want, an hour on the phone or online. So you can take advantage of that offer either by, you can go online and order online on our website, you can send me an email, or you can phone us. We'll take a credit card, or if you need to, we can invoice you for that, so that we make sure that you get your bonus with that. So I've run out of breath and we've run out of time. I will hang around for about another 5 minutes. If you have more questions, you can type them in. Otherwise, that brings us to the conclusion of our webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it, and especially if you've been a first-time webinar participant, I hope you've got value from that. And my aim was to give you something to think about news, and I hope that you'll come back next year for more. Keep an eye on the newsletter for dates and times. And this is Anne Rolfe saying thank you very much for joining us, and I wish you all the best for the holiday season. Look forward to talking to you in the new year, and do remember, take advantage of that offer if you want those bonuses. And I'll just check what questions are coming through. Thank you very much.